Darius Thomas had never imagined that his life would come to this. At 42 years old, he had been one of the brightest stars in the tech world. His startup, Tech Vision, had been on the verge of transforming the way technology worked for everyday people. He had ambitious plans, a vision that could have shaken the foundations of the tech industry. Yet here he was, sitting in the driver's seat of his worn-out car, driving down a dusty back road, and watching his dreams slip further away with each passing day. Darius had spent the past 7 years building Tech Vision from the ground up. With nothing but sheer willpower and a handful of dedicated engineers, he had managed to create a product that caught the attention of some of the biggest players in the tech industry. But that attention quickly turned cold when they realized who the founder was: a black man. The investors, who had initially shown so much promise, had pulled out at the last minute, citing concerns that he wasn't the right fit for their vision. The irony wasn't lost on Darius. His company had been crushed not by a lack of innovation, but by the color of his skin. The racism he had faced in his professional life was nothing new, but it stung just the same. With Tech Vision's downfall, Darius's financial world had crumbled. The once lavish office space was now a distant memory, replaced by the barren emptiness of his small apartment. His bank accounts, which had once been filled with investor money, were now a revolving door of unpaid bills. And now his car, a 1999 sedan, was a constant reminder of how far he had fallen. The engine roared, its sound far from the smooth hum it used to make, as Darius tried to keep his head above water. That afternoon, the universe, in all its twisted sense of humor, had one more surprise in store for Darius. As he drove down the road, he spotted her, a woman clearly out of place. She was standing by the side of the road with her thumb out, clearly hitchhiking. Darius had driven past countless hitchhikers before, but something about this woman made him hesitate. She was dressed in pristine, expensive athletic gear, her golden blonde hair falling messily over her shoulders. She didn't look like someone who would find herself stranded on this stretch of lonely road. There was something about her, something different that caught Darius's attention. Darius glanced at the rearview mirror. The thought of picking her up didn't sit well with him. He had enough trouble of his own. But then again, his instincts told him to stop. The way she stood there, a sense of helplessness mixed with confidence, made him feel as though he couldn't just drive past her. He slowed the car, rolled down the window, and called out, "Need a ride?" The woman looked up, her tired eyes meeting his. There was an unexpected calmness in her gaze despite the evident frustration that hung in the air. Her mouth quirked into a half-smile. "Actually, yes. I was just trying to get to the next town. Got a bit stranded out here." "Thank you." Darius opened the passenger door, and the woman climbed in, settling into the seat beside him. "I'm Darius, by the way," he said, trying to sound casual, though there was a hint of tension in his voice. "Alex," she replied, her voice a little more confident than it had been a moment ago. "Alexandra Winters. Nice to meet you." Darius raised an eyebrow. He didn't recognize the name, but it sounded familiar in some way. Maybe it was a name he had heard in passing, but he couldn't place it. He decided not to dwell on it and focused on the road ahead. The drive was mostly silent at first, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Darius's mind was filled with the endless cycle of unpaid bills and failed business ventures. Alex, on the other hand, seemed lost in her own world, occasionally looking out the window or glancing at her phone. After a while, Darius couldn't help but notice how out of place she seemed. Everything about her was too perfect. The designer gear, the smooth skin, the clean-cut appearance. Yet here she was, stranded on a back road, looking like she didn't belong. It didn't sit right with Darius. "So, what brings you out here?" Darius asked, trying to make conversation. "You don't seem like the usual hitchhiker I see around here." Alex's gaze shifted toward him, her expression guarded at first. But she didn't seem put off by the question. She took a deep breath and smiled. "Family business, I guess. I had a little falling out with my family, actually. Decided to get away for a bit, clear my head." Darius nodded, sensing the underlying tension in her words. He knew what it felt like to run away, to try and escape the weight of your past. He wasn't going to pry further. He had enough of his own problems to deal with. As the road stretched on, the conversation turned toward more casual topics. Darius learned that Alex was from a wealthy family, but she didn't go into much detail about why she had left. She mentioned her father, Richard Winters, in passing, but didn't seem eager to share much more. Darius didn't push her on it. Instead, he talked about his own struggles with his business and how things had gone from bad to worse. When they reached a small town, Darius pulled over to the side of the road. "This is where I have to drop you off," he said, glancing at her with a small smile. "Thanks for the ride, Darius," Alex said, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a small card. "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to call." She handed him the card, and Darius took it without much thought. As she stepped out of the car and waved goodbye, Darius couldn't shake the feeling that something about this encounter wasn't as simple as it seemed. Little did he know, that simple act of kindness would alter the course of his life in ways he could never have imagined. Alex Winters wasn't just any hitchhiker. She was the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the country, and her journey was about to collide with his in a way that would bring everything he thought he knew about business, power, and justice into question. Darius's life was about to change forever. Part 2. The Revelation. The next day, Darius couldn't stop thinking about the hitchhiker he had picked up the day before. Her name was Alex, and something about her had intrigued him. At first, it had been just a random encounter, a chance moment on the side of the road. But as the hours passed, Darius couldn't help but replay the conversation in his mind. She had been a bit reserved, but Darius understood that life had a way of putting up walls around people. And for someone like her, someone who clearly didn't belong in a backwater town like this, there was more to the story than she was willing to share. But that wasn't what stuck with him. It was the moment when she casually mentioned her father, Richard Winters. That name, Winters. Darius had heard it many times before, mostly in meetings, on TV, and in the headlines of financial reports. Richard Winters was the CEO of Winters Enterprises, one of the largest conglomerates in the country, specializing in everything from tech innovations to real estate. His company had crushed Darius's startup, TechVision, just a year ago when they bought out his primary competitor and drove him into bankruptcy. Could it really be? Darius muttered to himself, looking out over the quiet town from his apartment window. Could this woman, the one who seemed so detached from her world of privilege, be the daughter of the man who had destroyed his career? Darius hadn't thought about Winters Enterprises for a while. After the company had bought out his business, leaving him with nothing but unpaid bills and a broken dream, he had buried his anger deep inside. But now, hearing that name again, that frustration bubbled back to the surface. His gut told him that there was more to this story, that his meeting with Alex wasn't just random, it was a connection waiting to unfold. Later that afternoon, Darius sat down at his laptop typing Richard Winters into the search engine. The results flooded in with the usual headlines. Winters Enterprises expands into new markets. CEO Richard Winters makes another billion-dollar deal. And of course, the endless praise from industry leaders. But then, Darius found a link buried under all the corporate fluff, an old article from a trade journal that referenced a mysterious shift in Winters Enterprises operations. The article mentioned that Winters had aggressively acquired startups in niche markets, wiping out smaller competitors in the process. Darius's heart raced. He remembered the rumors in his own industry about shady tactics, but nothing had ever been proven. It was all speculation, until now. The article also mentioned a few personal details about Richard Winters' family, none of which Darius had ever paid much attention to until now. Winters Enterprises heir, Alexandra Winters, the article stated, referring to Richard's daughter, the same Alex who had climbed into his car the day before. Darius sat back in his chair, the weight of the situation sinking in. Alex wasn't just any random woman on the side of the road. She was a key player in one of the country's most powerful families, the very family that had torn his life apart. What was her involvement in her father's business? What did she know about his shady dealings? And why had she chosen to run away? His curiosity grew, but so did his caution. He knew better than to get caught up in another person's mess, especially someone from the Winters family. But something about Alex's situation and her defiance made him want to dig deeper. The next morning, Darius couldn't shake the nagging thought that he needed to reach out to her. Something told him that Alex might be in more danger than she was letting on. The stakes were higher than he initially realized. Darius decided to take action, knowing it would be risky, but he was no stranger to risks. He'd lost everything once before. What did he have left to lose? He dialed the number that Alex had given him the day before, the business card she had handed him as she got out of his car. He hesitated for a moment before pressing the call button. He had no idea what kind of response he was expecting, but he didn't have time to second-guess himself. The phone rang, and then she answered. Her voice was calm, though Darius could sense a certain wariness in her tone. "Hello. It's Darius," he said, trying to sound casual. "I was thinking about our conversation yesterday. I have some questions." A brief silence followed before Alex responded. "I'm listening." Darius hesitated, his mind racing with possibilities. "I did some digging last night about your father," he said slowly. "Winters Enterprises. I know what they did to my company, and I think you know more than you're letting on." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Darius could practically hear Alex weighing her words, considering whether to trust him or not. Finally, she spoke. "I never wanted any of this," she said, her voice filled with frustration. "I don't want to be a part of my father's empire. I don't want to be the daughter of the man who's destroyed so many lives. But I know the truth. I know what he's done." Darius leaned forward, sensing that she was about to say something important. "What do you know?" he asked. "I know everything," Alex said quietly. "I know about the fraud, the tax evasion, the manipulation of politicians and judges. And I know that my father will stop at nothing to keep his empire intact." Darius's heart sank as he processed her words. She was talking about the very things he had suspected. The corrupt system that Richard Winters had built was more insidious than Darius had ever imagined. And now Alex was in danger because of it. "I ran away because I couldn't stand it anymore," Alex continued. "My father is a ruthless man, and he's done things that no one should ever have to live with. I took the flash drive with me, proof of everything. He wants it back, and he'll do anything to get it." Darius's mind was racing. He understood now. Alex wasn't just a runaway. She was a whistleblower, carrying with her the evidence that could bring down an empire. And that made her a target. "I'll help you," Darius said, his voice steady now. "We need to make sure that evidence sees the light of day." Alex didn't respond immediately, but Darius could sense her relief through the phone. "Thank you," she said softly. "I never thought I'd find someone who would understand." They spent the next few minutes discussing their next move. Alex shared more details about the flash drive, the evidence she had, and how Richard's security was closing in on her. Darius knew they didn't have much time. The plan had to be executed quickly, carefully, and without alerting Richard Winters or his team. Darius hung up the phone and took a deep breath. His life had just taken a turn he hadn't seen coming. He had gone from a man with nothing to lose to someone who might just be the key to exposing one of the most corrupt empires in the country. He started his car, determination setting in. He wasn't just helping Alex. He was going to take down the Winters empire piece by piece, starting with the evidence she had. Part 3. The Plan. Darius spent the next few hours strategizing. The plan to help Alex had grown more complex by the minute, but Darius was used to pressure. He'd built his business from the ground up once, and he'd lost it all. Now the stakes were much higher, and he was determined to help Alex, even if it meant taking on Richard Winters and his massive corporation. First, he checked his resources. Although he was no longer a successful businessman, he still had a few tricks up his sleeve. His contacts from his previous business ventures could still be useful, though most of them would need to be carefully approached. No one in his circle had a reason to believe that he wasn't just a down-and-out entrepreneur anymore. The fall of Tech Vision had left him with little more than his name, but that name still carried some weight in certain circles. He made the first call to an old business partner, Maya Rivera, who had been a legal advisor for his company back when things were running smoothly. If anyone could help him navigate the complexities of corporate corruption, it was her. "Hello, Maya," Darius said when she picked up the phone. "I need your help. I've got a case that could bring down a very powerful man, and I don't know where to start." Maya's voice came through with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "What's going on? Who are we dealing with?" Darius hesitated. Richard Winters, he said flatly, the name hanging in the air between them. The CEO of Winters Enterprises. He's been behind my downfall, and now he's trying to cover up a massive web of corruption. I've got someone who's escaped from his grasp, and she's got evidence that could destroy everything he's built. Maya was silent for a moment, processing the gravity of the situation. Then she spoke, her voice filled with determination. All right, Darius, I'm in, but we need to do this carefully. Winters has his hands in so many pies that we'll need to move quickly and quietly. I'm already on it, Darius replied, but I need someone who can help us with digital security. There's no way we can go public with this without the right protection. I know just the person, Maya said. I'll get in touch with Zoe Chun. She's worked for the government in digital security and she owes me a favor. She's the best at what she does. Darius felt a surge of relief. Zoe's expertise was exactly what they needed to cover their tracks. If Winters had even a hint that they were on to him, everything could go south in an instant. Later that evening, Darius met Alex at the small cabin she had directed him to earlier. The place was tucked away in a secluded area of the woods, far from the prying eyes of Winters' private security. As Darius arrived, he couldn't help but notice how the tension between them had shifted since the day they first met. Alex was sitting at the small kitchen table, her expression tired but focused. She had the flash drive in front of her, and Darius could see the weight of what they were about to do in her eyes. She wasn't just running from her father's empire. She was going to take it down. Do you think we can really do this? Alex asked, looking up at Darius as he entered the room. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a mixture of hope and fear. Darius met her gaze with a steady look. We have no choice, he said simply. We do this right, and we expose everything. His corruption, the fraud, everything. It's time to take down Winters Enterprises. Alex nodded, though the uncertainty in her eyes didn't quite fade. And after that, she asked, her voice tinged with the possibility of a life beyond her father's shadow. Darius leaned against the counter, thinking for a moment. After that, we rebuild. We help the people who've been affected by his actions. We make sure no one else falls victim to his empire. Alex looked at him, her eyes softening. That's a big dream. Darius smiled, a genuine smile this time. It's a dream worth fighting for. The next day, Maya and Zoe arrived at the cabin. Maya was in her early 40s with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Zoe was in her late 20s with short-cropped black hair and a serious expression that spoke volumes about her professionalism. Darius, Maya said as they greeted each other, I've brought Zoe like I promised. She's the best we've got when it comes to securing evidence and covering our tracks. Zoe nodded at Alex, then glanced at the flash drive sitting on the table. Let me take a look at what we're dealing with, she said, and without further ceremony, she plugged it into her laptop. Minutes passed as Zoe analyzed the data. Darius watched her, his mind racing with thoughts of what the Winters family could do to stop them. He wasn't naive enough to think this was going to be easy. Richard Winters was not just powerful, he was dangerous. All right, we've got a lot here, Zoe finally said, her voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. Emails, internal communications, financial records. This is everything we need to nail Winters for fraud and corruption. Maya spoke up, her tone serious. But we need to be careful. Winters will stop at nothing to protect himself. He's got judges, politicians, and people in law enforcement on his side. If we move too fast, we could end up getting caught in the crossfire. Darius nodded. We'll move carefully. I've got contacts in the media who can help us make this public once we have the proof we need. But we need to ensure we've got everything airtight. Zoe began to type furiously on her laptop, her fingers flying over the keys as she sifted through the evidence. We'll need to decrypt some of these files, but we've got everything we need to expose Winters' practices. It's just a matter of when we pull the trigger. The days that followed were a blur of activity as Darius, Alex, Maya, and Zoe worked together to build their case. Zoe worked relentlessly to decrypt the files, while Maya crafted legal documents that would hold up in court. Darius contacted his old connections, using his past relationships in the tech world to create a network of support for what was about to happen. But the most important piece of the puzzle was Alex. With her insider knowledge of Winters Enterprises and her access to her father's system, she was able to provide crucial information that would tie everything together. Finally, they were ready. The evidence was in place. The plan set. Sharmazrenia and the legal documents were prepared. The stage was set for the downfall of Winters Enterprises, but Darius knew that it wouldn't be easy. Richard Winters was a man who would do anything to protect his empire, and the fight ahead would be fierce. But Darius was ready, ready to fight for justice, ready to fight for Alex, and most of all, ready to fight for the truth. Because in the end, the truth had the power to bring down even the most powerful empires. Part 4. The Revelation. The time had come. The team had prepared, and Darius could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This wasn't just about taking down Richard Winters. It was about something bigger, something more meaningful. It was about taking a stand against a system that had been built to keep people like him and Alex down. A system that had used and abused so many to get to the top. Darius stood by the window of his small cabin, watching as the sun began to set over the distant horizon. He wasn't the same man who had driven Alex that day, uncertain of what lay ahead. No, this time he was different. He was the man who had chosen to fight back, to take control of his own fate, and the fate of those who had been victimized by Winters Enterprises. Alex walked in, her eyes focused and determined, just like him. There was something unspoken between them, a bond forged through their shared struggle. Darius could see it in the way she carried herself now. No longer the scared, running woman from days ago, but someone who had learned the value of her own voice. "Ready?" Darius asked, turning to face her. Alex nodded. "Let's do this." The following morning, they were ready to execute the plan they had been meticulously working on for the past few weeks. They had gathered all the evidence they needed: emails, financial transactions, a clear trail of corruption that stretched across Winters Enterprises. Zoe had worked tirelessly on the technical side, decrypting files and securing the evidence, while Maya had prepared the legal framework to ensure that this time, Richard Winters would not escape. They had one goal now: to expose Richard Winters for the fraud he was. But they needed a plan that would be both swift and discreet. It was one thing to have the evidence. It was another to ensure that Winters wouldn't have the power to destroy it, or worse, bury it. Darius, Maya, and Alex headed to the back room where Zoe was already setting up the final touches. "All set," Zoe said, her voice steady and confident. She had prepared a system that would allow them to remotely broadcast the incriminating evidence to every major media outlet. At the same time, Maya would ensure that the legal paperwork was filed, creating a secure public record that would make it impossible for Winters to deny or counteract. Darius felt the tension in the air as he watched Zoe's fingers fly over the keyboard. This was it. They were about to make history. Meanwhile, at Winters Enterprises, Richard Winters was unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. In the sleek glass tower of his corporate headquarters, Richard was in the midst of an important press conference. He smiled confidently as he addressed the reporters, his well-tailored suit immaculate, his posture that of a man in control. No one in the audience would suspect that his world was about to come crashing down. "We are proud to announce our latest acquisition of Garner Technologies," Richard said smoothly, his voice oozing with self-assurance. "This acquisition represents a new phase in Winters Enterprises, where we continue to drive innovation, expand our market presence, and, most importantly, act with the highest level of integrity." The room erupted in applause, the journalists eager to hear more from the powerful CEO. But just as the cameras flashed, something unexpected happened. Back in the cabin, Darius, Maya, Alex, and Zoe watched the press conference unfold on the screen. Darius' heart pounded in his chest as he saw the unmistakable confidence of Richard Winters on display. But that confidence would be shattered in mere minutes. Zoe pressed a button and the screen flickered. The first round of emails and financial documents appeared on the display, followed by the criminal evidence of Winters Enterprises' illicit activities. But that wasn't enough. They needed to expose everything, and they had a plan to do just that. "Now," Darius muttered, his eyes focused on the screen. Zoe activated the program that would automatically send the evidence to every major news outlet, every media contact they had, ensuring that Winter's empire would be exposed to the world. The heat of the mid-afternoon sun seemed to stretch across the dusty road of Sunset Valley Park, a modest trailer park just outside of the city. Marcus Johnson, a 42-year-old black man with a weathered face and hands stained with grease from years of fixing cars, sat outside his small trailer, staring blankly at the envelope in his hand. It was his last paycheck, a month's severance pay from the very place that had fired him just that morning. The thought of it made his stomach twist. Marcus had always been the best mechanic in town. With over 23 years of experience, a master's degree in automotive engineering, and 3 patents under his belt for fuel efficiency systems, Marcus was well respected by those who truly understood the craft. But in the world he now lived in, none of that mattered. His skin color, his background, and his perceived intimidation factor had all led to his dismissal from Almeida Motors, a mediocre repair shop that catered to an elite clientele. The manager had said it straight: "Your presence is scaring away our best customers." Marcus had tried to hide the hurt behind a calm exterior, but the sting lingered. As he sat on the metal steps of his trailer, the weight of his situation pressed down on him. His daughter Zoe was at school. Thankfully, she wouldn't have to see him like this. He'd promised himself that he would provide for her, protect her from the struggles he had faced in life. But now he wasn't sure how he would keep his promise. His severance pay wouldn't last long, and with no job prospects in sight, Marcus couldn't help but wonder how much longer they could survive in their modest home. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the negative thoughts. It wasn't like him to give in to despair. He had faced hardships before. He'd been through so much in his life. But somehow the weight of this situation felt heavier. The metallic taste of defeat lingered on his tongue. The sound of an engine struggling to keep running broke him from his thoughts. Marcus looked up and saw a shiny champagne-colored Range Rover rolling down the road of the trailer park, its sleek exterior an anomaly in the otherwise humble neighborhood. It came to a stop just a few feet from his trailer, smoke billowing from the hood. The driver's door swung open, and a woman stepped out. She was around 35, impeccably dressed in designer clothes that stood out sharply against the surroundings. Her perfectly styled hair and heels suggested she was far removed from the modest lives of the people around here. She looked at her phone for a moment, clearly frustrated, before turning her gaze to Marcus. "Are you a mechanic?" Her voice was sharp, tinged with impatience. Marcus couldn't help but chuckle softly despite the situation. "I'm an automotive engineer," he replied, correcting her automatically. He wasn't just some average mechanic. He had designed cutting-edge systems for hybrid cars. He had revolutionized the industry, or at least tried to. "What's the problem?" he asked, already approaching the vehicle. The woman seemed to eye him for a moment, clearly unsure about his ability to help. But her frustration seemed to outweigh her doubts, and she quickly answered, "My car just died. I need to get to a meeting in an hour, and the repair shops I called won't be here for at least 2 hours. Can you help me?" Marcus assessed the situation. The smoke rising from the hood told him that the engine was overheating. It wasn't unusual for luxury cars, especially those with hybrid systems, to have such issues. But this one was different. He glanced at the model, a Quantum ZX by Sinway Technologies, a luxury electric vehicle that cost more than 5 years of his previous salary. He had worked for Sinway Technologies years ago, designing part of the very system that powered this car, but that was before everything went wrong. "I can take a look," Marcus said, his voice calm. He knew what he was dealing with. He didn't need to be intimidated by the expensive vehicle or the high-maintenance woman standing before him. This was his domain. As he lifted the hood, he was hit with a mix of familiar and unfamiliar elements. The cooling system had clearly failed. Overheating was often caused by a faulty thermal regulator. But this particular model was equipped with Sinway's latest hybrid system, which was far more complicated than anything Marcus had worked on before. He had been part of the original team that designed it. But after being wrongfully accused of intellectual property theft, Marcus had been kicked out. The bitter memories of his time at Sinway flooded back, but he pushed them aside. This wasn't about his past. It was about helping this woman. Marcus worked with precision, his hands steady as he examined the engine. It's the thermal regulator, he muttered under his breath. The system was designed to switch between electric and combustion modes seamlessly,